Hey, it's Rachel from Just Getting Things Done. I wanted to talk to you about mornings. I know for myself, it was something that I let go for kind of a long time because when was I going to have a conversation about it or when was I going to do anything about it? But there were too many days that I would drive to work and be upset with myself or be upset with my kids for the way that we had acted and the things that I had said. And it was just really frustrating. I would get to work and feel emotionally exhausted and just like, oh, I can't believe I have to start my work day now. Feels like I've already lived a whole entire day. And I didn't want it to be that way anymore. And I really think it's not that hard to change your mornings around. So I wanted to tell you two things that really helped me change my mornings, make them a lot calmer, and just go a lot easier for everyone. The first thing is to make the time to have that conversation with your family, but especially with your kids, about what you expect from them in the mornings. I started it by asking my kids, what do you think you need to do to be ready to leave in the morning? And it was really interesting to hear what they said. And my list is pretty short, but theirs was even shorter. So together we came up with the list of the things they need to do before they leave the house in the morning. And like I said, my list is really short. I need them to eat breakfast, get dressed, put on socks and shoes, get their bags. That's it. I logistically have never gotten to a point yet where we're brushing teeth in the morning, well, where they are, because their bedrooms are on a different floor and I don't want toothbrushes in both places, and it just doesn't flow very well for me to have them going up and down the stairs. There are too many chances for them to get distracted if I try and send them upstairs by themselves to brush their teeth at a later point. So same thing with making beds. It's not something that we're doing right now. Both of those things obviously are things that will be added in at some point, but I'm just keeping it simple for what we need to do right now. And I've seen a lot of stuff with people looking for printables and, checklists and stuff like that. You can make your own out of it, but honestly, it should be something that your kids can remember. They should know exactly what it is. They can definitely remember things. If you've ever made a promise to them or, told them they could have ice cream later, they're not going to forget it. So they should be capable. Obviously, if they're really young, they won't, be doing all this stuff on their own or be remembering or be in charge of doing this. But once they hit, at least by the time they're 3.5, depending on their developmental stage, they should be able to not only remember the list, but be in charge of doing almost all of these things on their own. And they can't do it unless they know exactly what it is you're asking of them. It's also important to have this conversation with your husband or your partner or whoever it is, if there is someone else there in the morning, so that you are both on the same page, doing things in the same order, getting the right things done, and not just silently getting angry with each other for not doing things the way you expect them to do, with that person not having any idea of what you expect of them. And it's a good chance to find out what your husband thinks could be done differently too, because if you're like me and my husband, you have totally different ideas about these things. So that in and of itself for me was a really huge step, to be able to just sit down with my kids, take that time. It wasn't even a long conversation. It was not a lot of effort. It was just something I hadn't ever done before. So I sat down with my kids. We had this conversation. They knew exactly what was expected of them. Then I also used this other little trick, which was super helpful for the second thing I want to tell you about. And the second thing is to stop reminding them all the time about all the things that need to get done, especially if you're going to let them be in charge of those things. Let them be in charge. They can get dressed by themselves. My kids don't make their own breakfast. We make breakfast for them. They just don't get their own food. That's not how we do things. But everything else, they're in charge of doing on their own. They can pick their own clothes. They can pick their socks and shoes. In the greater scheme of things, you're in charge of that because you're the one that provides that for them. But on the day-to-day basis, they can pick those things out. Honestly, my 3-year-old loves to wear pajamas to wherever she goes. I'm totally fine with it. She does what she wants, and I don't have to fight her about, trying to get her dressed or going and picking out clothes. I just let her do it and do her own thing. She knows that I expect it, and she generally is really good about doing it. But one thing that can really help kind of tie these two things together of not reminding them constantly and knowing what you expect from them is to have a code word, code phrase, a one-liner, something that you can tell them. You ready to leave, ready for school, whatever wording you want to use, have that one thing, and that's the only thing that you say to them about it. And it makes such a big difference. I give my kids generally 5 or 10 minutes. I know where they're at already because I've been around the whole morning. I don't just leave them to their own devices. So I know where they're at. I have a pretty good idea generally of how long it takes them to get from one stage to the next. And so when I know that time is coming up, I let them know. And maybe that's the point I ask them if they're ready, or maybe I tell them we have to leave in 10 minutes. And then at 5 minutes, I ask them if they're ready. Whichever way you want to do it, you're going to know your kids a lot better than I know them. But if you just have that one phrase that you use with them, instead of telling them, reminding them, asking them about every single little thing, it's going to make everything so much easier. I can't even explain it, because that's where the tantrums come in. When you're trying to force them to do things that they don't want to do, or in a way that you don't want to do, or at a time that they don't want to do, that's when they're going to have tantrums. And then when they start pushing back on you about things that they don't want to be doing, or being, not the right clothes or not the right shoes or whatever the things are, that's when, as a parent, you start to lose your own cool. So when you don't have to remind them about all those things and they know what's expected, and of course you have to have a routine, and if everything is done in a way that flows really good, it's going to make everything easier for the whole family. Like I said, I don't want them, it doesn't make sense for me to have them come downstairs and then go back upstairs and come downstairs and go back. That's not going to work. So you can also think about the order in which you do things and help them out with that. Have them get dressed before they come down, or whatever it is. There are lots of little tweaks that you can make to make the whole thing flow easier. But the biggest things for me are setting clear expectations and not reminding them constantly about the things they need to do. Have a one-liner, have a phrase that you use with them. Only use that. And if you really want to really go for it, be exaggerated and cheer for them, praise them when they do the things you want them to do. Especially at the beginning, this can be really fun for them, make it more interesting. And when you have more than one child and you can do it for one of them, then the other one is going to want to join on the bandwagon. So hopefully this is really helpful for you. Like I said, these two were kind of the big things for me that helped turn my mornings around.